Good evening and welcome to our 2019 Federal Election Candidates Panel discussion. My name is Jasmine Rowley. I am a video host for SooToday.com, and I will be acting as your moderator for tonight's forum. I would like to thank Algoma University, who has partnered with the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce to help plan tonight's event. I would also like to thank Shaw Spotlight and SooToday.com, who are televising and streaming these proceedings. We have a lot of information to hear tonight, so we are going to move to the questions very quickly. However, I would like to run through the format for tonight's forum for the sake of our viewing audience. All 5 candidates on the ballot for the October 21st election were invited to take part this evening. Seating and question order for the candidates was decided by a random draw prior to today's broadcast. Similarly, questions and their order were finalized before tonight's broadcast and prior to the candidates' draw. Questions were derived from multiple sources, including Algoma University's political science and law and justice programs, as well as the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce membership survey and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce Vote Prosperity platform. Questions will be posed tonight by students from Algoma University. We will start the forum by allowing each candidate 2 minutes to outline their and their party's election platform. Following the platform presentations, we will move into our question period moderated by myself. Candidates will answer questions from their seats. Once a question has been posed, each responding candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. In order to maintain fairness with each new question, a different candidate will respond first. For the first 5 questions, questions will be answered by the candidate on a clockwise basis, meaning candidates will respond following the response to their candidate to their immediate right. After that, questions will be answered by the candidates on a counterclockwise basis, meaning candidates will respond following the response of the candidate to their immediate left. I will help you if I can keep track of it. I will note that time constraints may prevent us from being able to pose all of the questions that have been prepared or submitted for today's event. I would like to remind all of a few ground rules. Interrupting candidates who have the mic, profanity, or any other remarks deemed unacceptable will not be tolerated. At any point, I may request that a candidate stay on topic. A demonstrated or repeated failure to stay on topic or any language deemed unacceptable will immediately result in the candidate's mic being turned off and may result in the candidate being asked to remove him or herself from the forum. At the end of the forum, each candidate will have a 2-minute opportunity to provide some closing remarks. We would like to thank and welcome the candidates who are joining us this evening. Terry Sheehan with the Liberal Party of Canada, Sunny Spina with the Conservative Party of Canada, Sarah McCleary with the New Democratic Party, Gio McLean with the Green Party of Canada, and Amy Zaccato with the People's Party of Canada. We will now open the floor to opening remarks by each candidate. You have 2 minutes each for your opening statement. First, as randomly selected in our draw, is Amy Zaccato.
Yes, hello, thank you for that, and thank you everybody for coming, and thank you for tuning in at home. My name is Amy Zaccato, and I'm the candidate for the People's Party of Canada in the riding Sault Ste. Marie. I live in Prince Township, which is in the riding for Sault Ste. Marie. And I want to talk a little bit about People's Party of Canada and just say how great that they are. In the name itself, it says People's Party. They are here for us, the people. They don't have the lines with the corporations that the formed governments have had. The People's Party of Canada has broken Canadian history by forming a year ago, and now we have 315 candidates across the board in Canada, coast to coast, out of the 338 ridings. The reason why people believe so much in the People's Party of Canada is the values for what we stand for: individual freedom, personal responsibility, respect, and fairness. These are 4 great qualities that will bring Canada back to its strong and free standards. We've had for over 150 years 2 parties that dominated Canada. And as Canadian citizen, we've seen little and little get done to help us living here on the ground, while they just got to the top and went higher and higher. The People's Party of Canada believe in balancing the budget. We believe it's financially irresponsible to keep spending all this money. We're spending money, our deficit is so high, and we are borrowing money to have social programs and to spend money, and we're taxing tax on tax. And people today in Canada are living paycheck to paycheck. Some of us can't afford our rent, and some of us can barely pay our bills for our heating that we have today. And I'm here not as a politician, but as a regular person, and with the passion and the conviction to speak on the behalf of the rest of the Canadians. I'm here to work for you, for the people of Sault Ste. Marie. You will be my boss. We are not a whipped party, which
Thank you. Sarah, you are next.
Thank you to everybody for organizing this and everybody who came and is watching. So I'm Sarah McCleary, the NDP candidate here for the Sioux, and I know, like all of us here, I've been going door to door. And the thing that I've been hearing the most when I'm going door to door is that people don't even know if they're going to vote. People are really disillusioned, and they feel, I don't know how many times I've heard, all you politicians, you're just the same. And so people aren't feeling like they should go vote. They don't feel like it's going to make a difference. And to be totally honest, I can absolutely understand why. We've had years and years of liberal and conservative governments that have done nothing to make life easier for everyday people like us. And, I myself work 3 jobs. I live paycheck to paycheck. I've been very open about that since the beginning of the campaign, that my family is not well off. And so when I was asked to run this year, I saw it as an opportunity, an opportunity for change and to help the people I see around me struggling in the same ways that my family is. And an opportunity to give a message of hope to the people of Sault Ste. Marie that politicians don't have to just be in it for themselves. They can actually be in it for you. And before I made my final decision whether or not to run, I read through the party's commitments to Canadians, and they really spoke to me. They are really very beneficial to all Canadians. Things like universal pharmacare and making life more affordable by creating more affordable housing and more affordable daycare, eliminating the interest on student loans. So I really feel that the commitments that we're making to Canadians are really, they'll help everybody in the Sioux. And so I'm going to end it there. Sorry, I'm looking at my time going down.
Thank you. Sunny.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here today, and thank you to everyone that's watching online. I can't tell you how much I appreciate seeing this many people engaged in this process and how many people have actually come out during this campaign, and it's very inspiring. I want you all to know that 4 years ago, I was not involved in politics, and then things changed. Justin Trudeau was elected, and I saw how his job-killing policies and his crippling tax increases began to hurt people in Sault Ste. Marie and hurt jobs in Sault Ste. Marie. I watched as people on the front line, I watched as a member of the front line, I watched as people struggled day to day in our community, and as these things were happening, I decided that I couldn't stand for that any longer. Now, I'm probably the only candidate in front of you today that can say that I've been asked by more than one party to run for them. That gave me an opportunity to review policies and platforms from multiple parties. And I landed on the Conservative Party of Canada because it was clear to me that the Conservative Party of Canada has a clear, realistic, and achievable plan that will help the residents of Sault Ste. Marie get back to work, will help put money back in the pockets of residents here in Sault Ste. Marie, and will not just let people get by, it will let you start to get ahead. Now, I've dedicated my life in service to this community for the past 17 years. 17 years ago, I swore an oath that I would protect every person in this community with every fiber of my being 24 hours a day. I've done that for 17 years, and as your MP, I will continue to do that day in and day out because that is the representation that each and every one of you deserves, and it's the representation that I will give each and every one of you. Now, you will have on my full platform tonight as we talk, and I welcome as many questions as you have because I am here to make sure that you get ahead and that I work for you. Thank you.
Thank you. A quick note to the candidates, if you can make sure there's some room between you and the mic when you're speaking so that we can hear clearly for the audience at home. Terry.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here and watching at home. It's been an honor to serve as your member of parliament over the past 4 years. Over the last 4 years, we've seen historic investments in this community. We've invested over $250 million. Things like the library down the street, the Rankin Arena, the Prince Township Pavilion, the YMCA, and Algoma University and Sault College. These investments have created real change for Sault Ste. Marie. I know that we're better off now than we were 4 years ago. I know that because Algoma Steel and Tenaris are able to grow again, and our seniors are getting increases to their benefits. And more than 13,000 kids are being helped in the Sioux by our Canada Child Benefit. But Conservatives, they want you to be disgruntled. They want you to be mad. They want you to think that our government doesn't care. I'm here to tell you that isn't true. I care, and your Liberal government has had your back. It is a disservice to democracy for you to be disenfranchised. This election, I want you to vote, because we know what happens when people don't care. We get Doug Ford and Andrew Scheer. We get cuts. We get fewer hospital beds, crumbling infrastructure, and less money for you. I have a record that I'm proud of. I've worked hard and delivered results for you. On October 21st, we have an important choice to make. We can choose to keep moving forward or to go backwards. I hope that I can count on your support. I look forward to listening to your comments and answering your questions you have for me. Thank you very much. And I also would like to thank and acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people of Garden River, and also of the people from Batchewana and the Métis Historic Society as well. Our relationships have grown over the last 4 years, and I thought that would be appropriate to mention as we start out. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Gio.
Thanks, Terry, for that land acknowledgement. I was about to do that myself, so thank you for getting there before me. So my name is Gio McLean. I'm the Green Party candidate for the Sioux. I'm a mental health worker, an educational assistant. I've also worked for behavioral intervention and as a manager of gender, sex, sexuality resource centers. And why I'm here is, I guess I'll harken back to 1992. There was a Rio Convention in Brazil. Canada signed on to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to prevent climate change. That was before I was even alive. They signed onto this agreement, and greenhouse gas emissions in Canada have not reduced significantly since then. Per capita they have, but as a country it is not. So I'm here to acknowledge that and to bring a platform that actually addresses climate change. Now, in addition to that, a lot of people think that the Green Party is a one-issue party, and climate change is not a one-issue issue. The solutions for it are very complex and include so many areas of our life. It's poverty, it's housing, it's cutting into corporate lobbying. It's so many different parts of the way that we live, and the Green Party wants to address all of that. Guaranteed livable income, eliminating tuition, eliminating student debt. These are all parts of the platform that will support individuals, will allow for investment in green technology and in transportation, and will allow for us to reduce our carbon footprint and invest in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now proceed with the questions. If I could have the first question, please. And a reminder that each candidate has 2 minutes to respond.
Hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Patricia Maitland. I'll start us with the first question. So, do you and will you support the development of our natural resources like oil, gas, metals, mining, and processing? The obvious example is developing the Ring of Fire and the ferrochrome processing facility. What will you specifically, as a representative for Sault Ste. Marie, do to advance these initiatives?
And Ames Acado, we start with you.
Patricia, for your question. That's a very good question. So the People's Party of Canada, we believe in getting the pipelines up and running, so that'll help with supporting the development. We want to get that immediately, and we're going to use the Constitution to do that, 92 Section 10. Also for the ferrochrome plant, just to bring that up, and it's great for Sault Ste. Marie economy if the people of Sault Ste. Marie want it here, and it would be safe if it passed all of the environmental clauses and restrictions that are meant for it. For smeltering, we already have one in the steel plant, and they want to put it right beside where we already have. And there's so much technology out there, even though the steel plant isn't up to snuff, they're supposed to be, but they're delaying on their thing. If we enforce the legislation that is there, and the plant could have a fail-safe program where if there was contamination that got released, that it would have a a thing put in place to clean up the environment or to fix what's happening, then that could be safe. But it's definitely more information is needed for that, and more consulting is needed. I know they have October 24th, they have a meeting, which I'm sure half of Sault Ste. Marie should be there listening to find the information about this. It's scary for everybody because we think about our safety and our health and the environment, but there are a lot of technology and innovative programs out there and equipment that would stop these smeltering pollutions going to the air. The People's Party of Canada has, for our climate and environmental platform, we want clean air and clean water and clean drinking water and safe air to breathe. So these are very important things for the People's Party of Canada. So it goes across the board. But in Sault Ste. Marie, the ferrochrome plant, we definitely need more information and to make sure that the legislation is enforced.
Thank you. Sarah McCleary.
Thanks for your question, Patricia. In terms of natural resources, we definitely are supportive of some, maintaining some natural resource industries. So things like forestry, absolutely, we need to continue responsible forestry. When it comes to the fossil fuel industry, it's a little bit more complex, right? We know that we need to move away from fossil fuels. So we know that we need to, stop the subsidies going to the fossil fuel industry, and we need to develop new technologies and move away from fossil fuels. So, we don't want an immediate stop to the use of fossil fuels. We understand that it has to be gradual, if for no other reason than to maintain those jobs. But we do want to move away from that and invest more in renewable energies and move in that direction. As far as the ferrochrome smelter goes, I think all of us here recognize that any elected official has a responsibility to the people in the Soo who are looking for work to explore every opportunity to bring jobs to the Soo. But it is extremely important, number one, that it is shown by an unbiased, independent assessment, not just one provided by Noront and not just based on current provincial standards and federal standards, because we know that those are not strong enough. So we need to make sure an unbiased assessment shows that it is safe, especially given that it will be going right next to the Great Lakes. And also, we need to make sure that it gets the consent of the First Nations, because without that, it cannot go forward. And we also have to remember, too, that elected officials are they're responsible to their constituents. So if 90% of the people in Sault Ste. Marie say, no, we don't want this plant, then it's also up to us to say, well, then we can't support it. So in terms of the Ring of Fire, if that is what the First Nations in that area would like to do, then we will work with them absolutely to move forward at the Ring of Fire.
Thank you. Sonny Spina.
Thank you. This is an incredibly important question. The natural resource sector in Canada is something that is absolutely huge and something that all of Canada relies on. More importantly, it is something that we here in Sault Ste. Marie rely on. And we don't have to look much further than our tube mill and our steel plant to realize how important that sector is to Sault Ste. Marie. I recognize that right now there are about 50% of the workforce at the tube mill laid off. And most of that is because our energy sector is not firing. We aren't drilling wells, we aren't sending oil across this country. The Conservative Party of Canada has a plan, and our plan is to get the oil fields back working so that we can support workers in Canada and support Canadian energy. Now, why do we want to support Canadian energy? Because we recognize that when we use Canadian energy, that it is safer, that it is better on the environment, and that we have a better human rights record than any other country when it comes to harvesting this energy. So we want to use Canadian oil, Canadian energy across this great nation, and within 10 years, we'd like to be self-sufficient on that energy so that we're not buying it from places like Saudi Arabia that have a terrible human rights record and a terrible environmental record. It's important to note that we would like to create an energy corridor across Canada. Why do we want to do that? Well, because we can minimize the environmental impact of these projects. We can have them in a single area, save money on the environmental assessments by doing it once, and by gaining consent from our provincial and First Nations partners upfront and ahead before these projects go ahead. Now, I know that we make the best steel anywhere here in Sault Ste. Marie, and I want to do everything I can to get that steel to market and everything I can to get both of those mills firing at full capacity so that everyone in Sault Ste. Marie can get back to work and we can start being a player again in this community.
Thank you. Terry Sheehan.
Well, thank you very much for the question. As a member of the Economic Federal Committee and also as the Northern Ontario Liberal Chair, this is always very near and dear to my heart. In Northern Ontario, the resource sector is of tremendous importance. In fact, not too long ago, I had announced the Magino gold mine here in Sault Ste. Marie. It's a mine that's not far from this riding at all, and it represents 550 construction jobs, 350 permanent jobs. We have approved 5 or 6 different mines in the area because it is critical. Forestry industry is very important as well. There are people in Sault Ste. Marie that rely on that, and we continue to move forward. And the steel that we produce here is extraordinary. When Trump had put the 232 tariffs on steel, when we were down in Washington fighting the good fight to get the unfair and unjust tariffs removed, we talked about how integrated our markets are as it relates to being a resource city that the Chamber of Commerce has backed, and we were called that right after I was elected. We take resources from both sides of the border to steel, then we put it into supply chains in the energy sector and manufacturing. As it relates to the TMX project, we have approved it not once but twice with stringent environmental assessment and consultation with First Nations. The former government had 10 years to diversify and get our resources to market, but they were unsuccessful because they couldn't get through with the consultations, which made us reliant on the United States. So we sell our oil and gas at an extreme discount to the United States, and we now are moving forward. We're going to take the profits from the TMX and put it into a green fund so we can transition to a green economy, and Sault Ste. Marie will benefit from those particular
Thank you.
Thank you. Gio McLean.
The Green Party is the only party that has a plan specifically for stopping fossil fuel development, for diverting fossil fuel subsidies to renewable energies, and the only one that's actively working to divest from fossil fuels. We recognize that by investing in those things, we are jeopardizing our future. So by transitioning all that money towards renewable energies, we're hoping to instead create more sustainability in that way. In addition, we're hoping to strengthen the Canadian Environmental Protections Act that was gutted by the Harper government. And that's relevant because it would make more stringent laws around projects like ferrochrome. As it is, the project needs to be designated by the ministers of environment in both provincial and governmental level, federal level, and it needs to be, it definitely needs to be done by them, but it's not set yet. So we have to ensure that that happens. Now, the Sioux tribe, Sioux Michigan tribe, has declared that they do not want the ferrochrome to go through. And I have a hard time saying yes to something that Indigenous people nearby have said that they do not want. And especially if Indigenous people on our side do the same thing, then I cannot get behind that project, as well as the citizens of Sault Ste. Marie and area. It's on an international border, it's in the center of the city, it's right at a water, right on the water. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hello, my name is Isabella Ingerselli. What do you see as the biggest threats to the health of Sault Ste. Marie's and Canada's natural environment, and what will you and your party do about it?
Sarah, you are first.
Thank you for your question. I'd say the biggest threat is climate change, 100%. So we know that, particularly here in Northern Ontario, we're susceptible to flooding and fires. So we need to make sure that we are acting to prevent that. We are committed to developing a a climate action plan specific to Northern Ontario to make sure that we're ready to address those threats if or when they happen. So we need to make sure that we're prepared to fight those fires that we know are going to happen with the changing climate, and to address the flooding that we know is going to happen, and to help the communities that will be impacted by that. So a part of that will be working with municipalities to develop action plans and to make sure that they are prepared, whether it's with infrastructure or training for emergency services, making sure that they're prepared to address those eventual occurrences.
Thank you. Sunny?
Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you very much for this question. You know, here in Sault Ste. Marie, we live in an area that is absolutely the envy of most around the world. The natural beauty here is not found anywhere else. And we don't have to look much farther than literally just around us here, being on the waterfront, just like this. These are areas that we must protect. We must do everything we can to protect our environment. And when we talk about the fight against climate change, it is very clear that the Conservative Party of Canada has put forward the most robust environmental plan ever put forward by an opposition party in the history of this country. And that plan focuses on 3 key areas. 1, focusing on technologies, not taxes. We recognize that a carbon tax is nothing more than a tax plan, plain and simple. It will do nothing to change the behaviors of people in Northern Ontario, and it will hurt us here and take money out of our pockets. It also exempts the largest emitters and puts the full brunt of that tax to be paid by residents here. Now, our plan, in contrast, forces the largest emitters to invest their own dollars into their infrastructure so that they can become cleaner and greener and emit less. The next thing we want to do is promote a cleaner, greener natural environment. And we're going to do that by restoring funding to wetlands and conservation areas that has been taken back. We also want to increase our ability to recycle plastics, and we want to decrease the use of plastics across Canada. Now, the third way we're going to do that is by taking the climate change fight global. I often tell people that emissions, unlike people, do not require a passport to cross borders. It's important for us to know that in Canada, we can be leaders in the climate change fight. We can take our technology and we can take our process and bring it around the world to reduce emissions around the world, recognizing that Canada is only 1.6% of global emissions. While we can be a leader, we have to help our partners around the world reduce their emissions if we are going to have a true impact on climate change. And that's what a Conservative government will do for you.
Thank you. Terry?
Pollution, climate change, those are absolutely of critical importance to tackle. We have a real plan to fight climate change and to fight pollution. I can tell you here in Sault Ste. Marie as a city councillor, I know I've seen it firsthand. We are getting 100-year storms every few years. We're seeing flooding in all parts of the city and all parts of this particular riding. We've come up with a plan to get to net zero emissions. We also are investing in businesses that invest in green technologies to get there and create jobs. And Sault Ste. Marie, as the alternative energy capital of North America, is in a perfect position. You know, the small business rate from 11 to 9 to 4.5%. So there's opportunity in creating jobs as we fight climate change and pollution. I can tell you the last flooding a couple of weeks ago, there were so many people out there that I ran into knocking on doors, and it really, really broke my heart. They lost everything. They have no insurance. They have no insurance to cover them. Or this was the last one that they could have, and they knew they weren't going to have another insurance. That's why we're bringing in an affordable national flood insurance program to help people like that, our friends and families that have been hurt by climate change. Think about the people that have asthma, that can't go outside because of days that are not healthy. We have a real plan. The Conservatives do not have a real plan. It's a fake plan. And we are putting in real change. We're putting a price on pollution. The Auditor General has verified that our price on pollution and our climate incentive that we're putting forward to make those changes work. And it has been verified by that particular auditor, the Federal Auditor General, because we need to continue to do that. And we know we can create jobs, and I know that we can continue on the way forward, because the opposition parties, they think you can either do the economy or the environment. We know we can do both. Thank you.
Thank you. Gio?
So one thing I'd like to acknowledge about what the Conservative Party is bringing forward is that part of the Paris Agreement, the reason that it's set out how it is so that developed countries can get ahead with green technology before developing countries, so that we can invest in them and help them get on their feet and onto a green economy. We can't do that until we've done it ourselves. We can't go to a country and say, you have to clean up your act when we haven't done it ourselves. So a real climate plan that addresses the health concerns of people and around the world includes, yes, investment in research and development. It also includes committing to plant trees and divest from fossil fuels, moratorium on fossil fuel development, phasing out internal combustion engines, investing in electrical vehicles, investing in a national electrical grid. There's so many things that we need to do that the Green Party is putting forward and that the other parties have not established yet. And they're fact-based, evidence-based, tried and true things that already exist. We don't have to look for carbon capture systems because we have trees. It already exists. And industrial carbon capture technology doesn't exist yet, but solar panels do. Geothermal does. Hydro does. So we just have to start doing the things that we know works, and then we can bring the fight international. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy.
Great, thanks, Isabella, for your question. That's really a good one. So the biggest fear that I feel in our society today is pollution. We have companies and municipalities that are dumping sewage straight into the waterways that can affect us and straight into the oceans. And this affects the wildlife and pollutes. It's a type of pollution. It's too strong, and it's ammonia to go directly into the waterways like that. The other thing that I just wanted to point out, it's not a disputed fact that the climate changes all the time. 12,000 years ago, and it'll continue to change, and that's the thing, and that's the way the world works. That's how Mother Earth works. 12,000 years ago, Canada was most of it was under ice, and if it wasn't for climate change, we wouldn't be living on it today. So the People's Party of Canada, we believe in the science and the history of Earth. And we believe that what we can do right now is make sure that enforce the bylaws that are there and the legislation that is there to keep pollution out of our air and out of our water. So sometimes corporations or companies are given leeways or extension times. So the People's Party of Canada believe in, we have the technology, we shouldn't be having to breathe in dirty air. If you have the fix and it's going to cost you an extra $10,000, $100,000, $250,000, too bad, so sad. This is the legislation, and we're not giving you a leeway anymore. So the time is now to enforce these things and stop letting the companies get away with it. The other thing is we shouldn't have people in Canada without clean drinking water. That's kind of a sad thing. So we want to make sure that everybody in Canada has clean drinking water. And in Sault Ste. Marie, to make sure that the steel plant is abiding by the bylaws for keeping the environment green and clean, and any new programs or industries that come here today, that we make sure that these things are put in place.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi there, my name is Alec Pachariva. The last time Canada undertook a comprehensive review of its tax system, humankind had yet to set foot on the moon. In the 5 decades since, repeated cutting and pasting has left Canadian taxation uncompetitive, cumbersome, and inefficient. What will your party do to modernize Canada's Tax Act for taxpayers and for business?
Thank you, and we start with Sunny.
Thank you very much. This is a very important question. When it comes to our party, one of the first things that we want to do is work to make life more affordable for Canadians. When we look at the taxes that individuals are paying now, we recognize that people, especially in the middle class, there's about 80% of people in the middle class are paying more taxes now than they were 4 years ago. So when we looked at that, we wanted to design a tax break that would be for everyone, a universal tax cut that would not just help the wealthy and not just help the middle class, but a tax break that would help everyone. We introduced a universal tax cut in the very bottom, lowest tax bracket. That's the tax break we're proposing. In the lowest tax bracket that starts at $12,000. So whether you make $12,000 or $112,000, it doesn't matter. Your taxes are going to go down. Now, when we look at that, we're going to take that further. We're also going to remove the GST from home heating and energy costs in order to save people money. We also recognize things like starting a new family become very expensive when you take a reduction in wages and then get taxed on those wages. We want to make parental benefits tax-free, saving an average Canadian family about $4,000. The universal tax cut will save an average Canadian family about $850. Now, next, we look to our seniors, and we want to freeze the old age security age at 65, and we want to increase the tax benefit by another $1,000, which will put another $300 back in the pockets of a senior couple. When you add that up, those are significant savings to the people of Sault Ste. Marie and Canada that they can put back in their pockets and ensure that they can spend their money the way that they intend to spend their money, not the way the government intends to spend it.
Thank you. Terry.
Thank you very much for that question. And when we ran in 2015, we ran on tax cuts for the middle class because they hadn't had a break in a decade. So we've done that, and it's diametrically opposed to the former Conservative government did, and this Conservative government proposes. We don't believe in the trickle-down effect. We believe in tax breaks directly to the middle class, and that's why we're going to continue to enhance that in this platform. We are also going to make sure that the first $15,000 is tax-free, no taxes paid, so that will be for middle class and lower income earners. We also introduced a major benefit. It's called the Canada Child Benefit, and it's tax-free, and it's helping over 13,000 kids in this riding get ahead. So the former government gave you a check, but then at tax time they took a whole bunch of it back. You get to keep that, and we've enhanced it a couple of times, and we are committed to enhancing it again, another percentage of 10% over the next little bit. We've also increased the guaranteed income supplement for seniors, the CPP benefit. We rolled back retirement age from 67 to 65, and also the OAS. As it relates to business and to be becoming more competitive, we have reduced the small business tax from 11 down to 9%. It's the lowest in the G7. It's making it even more competitive. As we continue our transition to, a new green economy, we're also going to cut that in half to 4.5%. And Sault Ste. Marie is in a great position to take advantage of that with all of these neat new green businesses that are happening here. We're having a renaissance of entrepreneurship here, and it's very exciting. We are going to continue on investing in people, investing in communities, because that's what we do. But we also believe that more money in people's pocket here in Sault Ste. Marie is better because they spend it locally. They enhance the economy. We don't wait for the trickle-down effect.
Thank you. Gio.
So, echoing what Terry just said, trickle-down effect doesn't work. It's not really a thing. So, the Green Party in our budget, the parliamentary budget office went through our budget and looked through all the different areas of revenue that we're hoping to leverage. And I'm confident in saying that we can afford the programs that we're putting forward through taxation on large corporations, on e-commerce corporations like Netflix, Facebook, Amazon, that at this point don't pay taxes. And yet we do. So how is that a fair taxation when huge profits can be made while we're struggling? So taxing them. There's the corporate meals and entertainment tax deduction, which the PBO said would cost Canadians $800 million a year. In our plan, that's the same amount of money. That's more money than we're hoping to spend to refit Canada Post with entirely electrical vehicles. Just by cutting out that one tax deduction, we'd be able to fund that kind of program. So there's way more things in this. Part of it's increasing the federal corporate tax rate to 21%. That's the same as the USA, the most corporate-driven country in the world. And ours is 15, we want to put it up to 21%. We're not going to touch small businesses, and we're not going to touch the average person's tax rate. So thank you.
Thank you. Amy.
Okay, I'll see if I can get this all in 2 minutes. Was your name Alex?
Alec.
Alec, thank you, Alec, for your question. So the People's Party of Canada has a tax reform. This is really great. So if you make $15,000 or less, your tax rate federally is 0. If you make $15,001 to $100,000, your tax rate across the board is 15%. Anything above $100,000 is 25%. This simplifies our system. Throughout the years, I understand your anguish. We've been spending, I think it's like $7 billion just in how our tax system works and the levies and all of our tax laws. It's so complex. We have 5 different tax brackets. It's excessive. And originally, income tax wasn't even a thing until after World War II, and it was supposed to just be temporary, but here we are today with 5 different classes. In saying that, I also want to say that we're going to drop the capital gains tax. So right now it's 50%. We're going to drop it down to 0 in 2 years. So what this tells us is when you try to get ahead in life, you get penalized. The government wants to penalize you if you buy a house and you sell it and you get capital gains, and then they want to take half of your money. We don't feel like that's fair. The other thing we want to do is with the corporate tax, right now it's 15%, and we want to decrease that to 10%. It's not to give the big guys a tax cut. It's because to make Canada more inviting for investors to come here and put up more companies and invest in Canada and our economy. And when we bring industries like that into Canada that have the money and they can have it's an extra $7.5 billion a year, they can hire more people, they can increase wages, they can give benefits, and they can fill our economy in holes that we're missing and that we have in Canada, and they can build, the economy is what's going to take to build up to make Canada strong and free. Thanks.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thanks for your question. We recognize that, life is getting very expensive, and our primary goal is to make life more affordable for the everyday Canadian. So we are not going to increase any taxes on the everyday Canadian, but we are going to make taxes fairer. So we're going to ask the richest to contribute a little bit more. So anybody with $20 million or more in wealth, we're going to ask them to pay an extra 1% on that wealth, and that's going to bring in an extra $70 billion over 10 years. Anybody making more than, or at the very highest tax bracket, so more than $210,000 a year, we're going to ask them to pay an extra 2% on that highest tax, highest bracket. And then as well, we're going to make sure that it's easier for, when we turn to business, we're going to make it easier for families to transfer businesses. Right now, the tax system is really complex, and it's actually easier and less expensive for a family business to transfer outside of the family. So we're going to make that a lot more streamlined and less expensive to transfer to families. Like Gio mentioned, we want to make sure that large web services like Netflix are being taxed properly, because it's not fair that Canadian-based businesses are being taxed and they're exempt. So we want to make sure that they're being taxed fairly as well.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Bonjour. Bidabanaquit, Indigenous Cost, Neme and Dodam, Ganabajing and Donjaba. My name is Angela Trudeau, and I'm the president of Shingwak Anishinaabe Students Association at Algoma University, as well as Shingwak Kinamage Gamik. That being said, we live in a beautiful riding with many beautiful non-Indigenous people and Indigenous people. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its final report in 2015, which is over 4 years ago. 94 recommendations were made. What is your and your party's priority in terms of the implementation of these recommendations?
Thank you. Terry.
Well, thank you very much. We're committed to all of them. And I remember a story, though. Before I was a member of Parliament, I was at Algoma University, and then it was Chief Justice Sinclair who came across with the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations. And he had an excellent presentation. The room was full of people from all over the community, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, students, non-students. And after that presentation, a student from Algoma University asked a question: where do we start? So then Chief Justice Sinclair, who has now been made a senator by our government, said, education. We must start with education. And that's why I was proud when I was elected to champion and go to bat for and get funding for the Anishinaabe Discovery Center. $13.5 million, 3 different levels of installment. It's a great cultural and educational center for truth, for healing. And I can tell you that it's a game changer for this area, for truth and reconciliation. I think it's going to be good for this riding, but also for Canada and for the world to attract people here. Investments that we have also made in Algoma University and the taking back Shinwalk Hall to tell the story of the residential schools was absolutely critical. But we are committed to all of them. We also have been committed to fixing boil water advisories on First Nations. There was 87 that we have done, investing $2 billion, but we are committed to doing all by 2021. We are also doing it in a nation-to-nation way through the guidance of Indigenous people. And I can tell you that the missing and murdered women and girls recommendations, we're also committed to putting in place those recommendations so that horrid thing never ever happens again.
Thank you. Gio.
I'd like to thank you for your question. Canada is inherently a colonial state, and we need to get to the root of that. And the legal framework maintains that situation. So doctrines of discovery, terra nullius, we want to completely abolish those. They state they state that we have a right to be here because we discovered the land, but we did not. Canada did not discover Turtle Island. So part of our plan as well, is to work with Indigenous peoples to amend the Indian Act, bring up about the recommendations of TRC completely, as well as United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, and the calls to action for the murdered, missing Indigenous women and girls inquiry. And we need to do that because it's our responsibility as a colonizing country to attempt to reconcile and to decolonize the land we're on. And thank you for your work at Chingwak. It was an act of genocide. Residential schools were an act of genocide, and we need to reconcile our relationship with Indigenous peoples in that way. So with all of those calls to action, we want to implement those and not only bring Indigenous people to the table in terms of Canadian government, but go to the table of Indigenous people. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy.
Thank you, Angela, for your question. The People's Party of Canada, we do believe in fairness and respect and responsibility and freedom. And we respect the Indigenous ways and their culture and their world and their beliefs as well. And to have, since 2015, we've had these 94 recommendations. In your opinion, Angela, how many of these have been fixed out of the 94?
Well, we'll probably remain with you answering.
okay.
Yeah, we're not going to ask our
let's go
question.
on.
She's just here to
Okay.
pose the question.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
So my point on that is just, we will consider every one of these recommendations. You can't take the work from a group and just dismiss it. You have to enforce and look at these and activate on it, and action is everything. There's $21 billion a year that gets brought to Aboriginal communities, but there's still a lot of issues. The People's Party of Canada would like to investigate the money so that it gets put into programs that are specifically made for these communities, that they have a lot of holes in their society that they're lacking in their communities. There's social housing and clean water, and there's a lot of suicides and mental illness and expensive living. And some of these are remote areas and they have no way to commute. I'm looking at the the rails and opening up the lines. There's no roads sometimes to get to these areas. You have to go by plane or railway. And some of these systems have been shut down through the federal government and because of the funding and budget restraints. So the People's Party of Canada believe in uniting Canada and having the communities have access to clean water and communication routes and infrastructure and social housing.
Thank you, Sarah.
Miigwech for your question. So the NDP and Jugmeat and I personally are all committed to true reconciliation, not just saying the right things. We want to actually make sure that our actions are showing our commitment. So we are committed to implementing all of the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And we want to do that by making sure that we're co-developing a true nation-to-nation relationship with First Nations peoples. And in doing that, we want to develop a national action plan for reconciliation so that we want to make sure we're working with First Nations peoples to make sure that we're doing it the right way, and to make sure that we're implementing those calls to action the right way. We want to, for example, ending the court battles, the expensive court battles that there's no reason should be going on, and we're going to make sure that that stops immediately. We're also committed to implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the calls to action from the Missing, Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Sunny.
Thanks.
My apologies.
That's okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the questions. It's extremely important, especially when we talk about Sault Ste. Marie. And when I talk about Sault Ste. Marie with colleagues from around the country and around the province, I always tell them that Sault Ste. Marie's relationship with our First Nations partners is different than most other places. And I explain to them that we're separated by little more than a stoplight or a traffic light. And you don't really know whether you're in one community or the other than if you live here. So I always tell them, we do things better here than most places do around the country, and I think we need to take this and replicate it across the country. Now, our party is completely committed to the reconciliation process with First Nations across this country. We're committed and we're focused on bringing forward solutions that have tangible, measurable results on the ground. We want to make sure that we support effective investments in things like, and it's sad today that we still have to talk about clean drinking water. And that is sad that we have to talk about that, but unfortunately, we do. So we want to support investments in things like good, clean drinking water, housing, and healthcare. We want to make sure that we continue to have these conversations with our First Nations partners and that we continue to make sure that there is a positive future for all of Indigenous youth across this country with those investments. They have to make meaningful impacts on the ground in order for all communities to come together and move forward, and we really want to do that together. And I personally want to take what we do here in Sault Ste. Marie around our area, and I want to show the world how we can do this relationship and do it well all the way across Canada. Thank you.
Miigwech.
Thank you for your question. Next question, please.
Good evening. My name is David Humes, and my question for you today is, while there is no measurement of the total number of regulations across all levels of government faced by Canadian businesses, there are figures that help illustrate the extent of the regulation in the economy. In 2015, the federal government reported that there are 131,754 federal requirements that impose an administrative burden on businesses. Further hampering efforts of businesses is the fact that many regulations are inconsistent between various levels of government: federal, provincial, and territorial. All levels of government are being called upon to reduce red tape on businesses. What will your party do as government to ease legislative red tape on Canada's businesses?
Thank you. And Gio, you are first.
There are definitely very dramatic figures that you bring out, and I agree that there's certainly room for streamlining those processes and cutting red tape, that sort of thing. But a lot of those regulations, similar to health and safety rules, are written in red. They're written in blood. And to impose rules like a 2-for-1 regulation rule doesn't address the fact that we need regulations to some extent, and a lot of those regulations are put in place for very good reasons. So I hesitate to give you a firm rule on how we will amend the legislation around regulations, but it comes down to what's reasonable and what's safe for Canadians and can also allow for growth of businesses. Yeah, thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Amy.
The People's Party of Canada, thank you, David, for your question anyways. The People's Party of Canada want to reduce the size of government. Government has grown so large over the years that a lot of portion of our taxes just goes towards the wages. But there's so many intertwining agencies between federal, provincial, and municipal levels that you're right. There's a lot of red tape. The People's Party of Canada wants to cut that red tape. This makes it more inviting for companies to want to come here and they want to invest. The issue is that we're already governed by the municipal government where we live. We already have all those rules, and those are very fine and a lot of rules. And then you have the provincial government that puts in all this social type of rules, and we have all those rules. We have to abide by all the rules. The federal government should just be more of the rules that go across the board and that fit for all Canadians, not little minority groups and little communities and things like that. Let the province and let the municipal handle those types of social legislation. The federal government should just be a simple, reduced government just to lessen our taxes and to work financially on keeping the deficit down and balancing the budget and looking at the overall picture of Canada instead of micromanaging it. The more rules we have, the harder it is for companies to come here and comply with everything. It's very confusing. If anybody had to call in the government just for something, say tax revenue, a question, you don't know which agency to contact, and then they'll give you a different number, then you call that one, and then they give you a different number. It's very complex. We should have somebody that does that work for us, that works in the government, that knows where to go, because we always get redirected everywhere. So it's very confusing. There's definitely gone completely overboard on the agencies and the laws that we have to abide by. It's very hard. So we believe in reducing all of the red tape.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you for your question. I'm kind of somewhere in between their responses. So, I agree with Gio that a lot of the regulations are there for a reason. So I'm not going to commit to, absolutely we're going to get rid of all of them. But I think that there's no question that the federal and provincial governments have not worked well together for a very long time on a number of issues. And business red tape being one of them, the regulations, there's absolutely room to work better together, and I would 100% be looking into doing that. We do have some commitments in terms of reducing red tape, things like making it easier for small businesses to get their product to market and supporting them in that way. And also, reducing the red tape and making it easier for housing developers to develop affordable housing. So we are looking at that in some respects. There are certain areas that we are fully committed to doing that I will say right now, yes, we'll do it. But overall, I would say it does come down to the different levels of government not communicating properly, and that's gone on for too long. And I am fully committed to addressing that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Sunny.
Thank you, sir. Important question. Thank you very much, and it was a pleasure meeting you before we started here today. So I'm excited to actually hear your question. We recognize that over the last 3.5, 4 years, there have been 4,300 new regulations imposed on small businesses across Canada. Now, that is crippling small business across Canada. That and the new taxes imposed by the Trudeau Liberals are crippling small businesses. And I personally do not want to give any business another reason to leave my community or leave this country. I want to make it so attractive for them to be here that they never want to leave, and that they can operate fully, and that they can hire as many people as they can. That's why a Conservative government next week will commit to reducing these regulations by 25%. We'll introduce a rule that says if we intend to impose a new regulation on small business, we'll have to repeal 2 others first. We'll assign a minister that will report directly to the Prime Minister, and that minister's goal and objectives will be to reduce red tape and make it easier for businesses to navigate Canada's tax system. We recognize that we have some of the best thinkers and innovators across the world here in Canada, and we want to make it attractive for them to be here. That's why all of our ministers and regulators will be directed that any work they do is to support economic growth, innovation, and global competitiveness. And the reason for that is because we want to champion Canadian small businesses around the world and give them every reason to stay in our country, be profitable, be successful, and hire as many of our people as they can so that we can show the world our best and brightest. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry.
Well, thank you very much. And my work on the industry committee, which is the economic development committee, we had testimony on this very subject, very important subject, and we've made some key recommendations. And what I heard at that committee meeting was the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, which is, members are here in the Soo as well, some are chamber members, some aren't, but they're a very vocal group. And they were before us, and they had told us that they actually awarded our government the golden scissors for cutting red tape that had been there for a decade. Old antiquated rules and regulations that just didn't make any sense. And somebody who has helped entrepreneurs start before politics, I know how important that is because it's scary trying to start a business. So we want to make it as simple as possible. And how we did that is by listening, sitting at the table with the businesses, sitting at the table with the different stakeholders and getting their feedback. And that helped us get the golden scissors to cut red tape. Further to that, we're going to lower costs, and I've already mentioned that we have lowered the small business tax rate, which is from 11 to 9% to the lowest in the G7, but we're doing a combination of cutting less red tape and also reducing costs. We're going to waive the fees on the Business Development Bank and Export Development Bank on business advisory services and mentorship training, which people need. So that'll be less cumbersome for people as well. We're also going to help entrepreneurs get the capital they need. We are committed to 2,000 entrepreneurs through a special fund, and my job will be to make sure that Sault Ste. Marie gets its fair share. We've also closed down barriers across the provinces for doing trade, and we're going to set up a Canada Free Trade Tribunal to hear, investigate, and help resolve cases where domestic trade barriers exist. And that includes people who are accredited in skilled trades, make it easier to go from province to province.
Thank you. Next question, please. And now that I've just gotten the hang of the order, we are going to switch the order to counterclockwise.
Hello, my name is Isabel Farstead. Health and income security are largely provincial jurisdictions, but they can be affected a lot by federal funding and oversight, as well as by federally run pensions and income security plans like the CPP and EI. What will you and your party do at the federal level to ensure good quality health care and income security for the people of Sault Ste. Marie?
Me?
Yes, that is you, Gio. Yes, you got it.
So I'm really excited about the Green Party platform on this. We want to implement guaranteed livable income for people who live below the poverty line. So that will help seniors, people with disabilities, students, and we'd have to establish that with provincial government as well as municipalities to streamline those programs. We also want to enshrine housing as a fundamental right, and safe and affordable housing specifically. So that would go a long way in reducing issues around housing and affordability and that sort of thing. And in terms of health, we want to change how we pay provinces based on need and demographics instead of GDP as it is now. This will allow for more flexibility in terms of the growing an aging population, as well as mental health strategies that we need to implement, and the opioid crisis that we're in. In addition, we want to implement pharmacare, universal pharmacare for all, and dental for low-income Canadians. And There's something else, but I'm blanking. So thank you for your question.
Thank you. Terry?
Well, thank you very much for that question. And we have released a healthcare platform, and it includes something that's of absolute critical importance to this community and to Canada. And it's the National Pharmacare Program. People shouldn't have to choose between eating food, heating their house, or getting the medication they need, whether it's insulin or inhalers. So we are committed to rolling that out in a responsible way. We have an expert panel that have made recommendations. We've already set the stage in passing legislation on certain patent prescriptions, which will make prescription drugs much more affordable. How can we have universal health care without pharmacare? We as Canadians pride ourselves. We define ourselves as Canadians on our healthcare system. We've seen what Conservatives do. They cut healthcare. They've done it. We're going to make sure that we also invest in making sure that 5 million Canadians that don't have a doctor or a healthcare professional have access to one. That's critical. I've been at the door and I've been hearing it again and again and again. We're going to get into doctor recruitment and also make sure people have access to healthcare professionals. Affordability is absolutely extremely important. I think about our $40 billion 10-year plan for affordable housing. And I'm proud in Sault Ste. Marie we've invested in 9 different projects, including the Rosedale project that was discussed right here, which is going to be for seniors. But within the seniors' home isn't really neat. They also have a daycare place. They have a community center. You know, we need to do more of that because it's important. We have invested a lot in seniors with the increases to the guaranteed income supplement, enhancement to the Canadian pension plan, and the old age security. And we've rolled back the retirement from 67 to 65, which is going to put thousands more dollars in people's.
Thank you. Sunny?
Thank you very much. I sincerely appreciate your question. We have an aging population here in Sault Ste. Marie. We know that, and it's important for us to do absolutely everything we can to take care of that population. We've built this city basically because of them, because of their successes and because of their failures. We've learned everything that we have today, and we need to do everything we can to support our seniors and support those that need health care. That's why the Conservative Party of Canada has a written guarantee to every single premier in every single province across this great nation. And that guarantee is this, that not only will funding for healthcare and social services not be cut if we are elected next week, we will increase that funding by a minimum of 3% every year. Now, what that means is that every single province across this country can count on predictable, sustainable funding for the foreseeable future, so they know that they will be getting the funding they need so that they can provide these services to Canadians coast to coast. We're also going to take that a step further, and we're going to invest $1.5 billion to buy equipment so that we can reduce wait times in hospitals for people who actually need tests, who are waiting far too long to get those tests. Now, I want to fight for every dollar of that to come to Sault Ste. Marie so that we can help people here that are waiting for these services. Now, when it comes to seniors, the other day, I spoke with a senior who told me that for the first time in her life, her pension and her husband's pension are no longer enough for them to cover their bills at the end of the month. Her husband now works a part-time job, and they're dipping into their savings. And that's not right. Those are the people I want to fight for, and we're going to do everything we can to keep their money in their pockets. We're going to reduce the age credit by $1,000, putting $300 back in the pockets of a senior couple. We're going to reduce their income tax rate, putting an average of $850 back in their pocket. We're going to get rid of the carbon tax, and we're going to remove the GST off their home heating. We're going to go further and save them $120 a year if they take public transit. And we're also going to give them a tax credit for green home energy renovation.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you for your question. There's a lot to it, so hopefully I'll be able to cover everything that I want to cover. In terms of healthcare, we're committed to recommitting the federal government to making healthcare a priority. So we're going to make sure that the provinces are getting the funding that they need to provide the services they need to provide, but then also ensuring that the provinces are following the Healthcare Act and providing those services that they're supposed to and using the funds they receive from the federal government in the way that they're supposed to. In addition, we are going to implement universal pharmacare, which will include medications, but also dental coverage, vision care, and mental health care. I've been pretty open since the start of this campaign about my financial struggles and the fact that for a few months, my husband had to go without one of his diabetes medications when he lost his benefits because we just couldn't afford it. So, it's absolutely important that we get universal pharmacare implemented yesterday. In terms of income security, we want to open all of the income security programs up to a review and make sure that they're livable rates, because we know that right now they're not. People are scraping by when they're on CPP or ODSP even, and we want to make sure that that's not the case anymore. I was speaking to a gentleman a few days ago who is on CPP, and he said that by the time he pays all of his bills, he doesn't even have enough money to buy a new pair of socks. So for the last couple of years, he's had 2 pairs of socks that he's been darning, and that's not right. Canadians have paid into these programs for their entire lives, and they deserve to be able to, live with dignity. And so we're going to make sure that that happens. We also want to implement a basic income pilot program Canada-wide to make sure that nobody is living below the poverty line. And then overall, just making life more affordable as well. We have a lot of plans to do that, like developing more affordable housing, more affordable childcare spaces, and eliminating the interest on student loans.
Thank you. Amy.
Thank you, Isabel, for your question. So at the People's Party of Canada, we have a great healthcare platform policy. The problem, and I'm glad that your question reinforced it, that healthcare is a provincial matter. So federally, we can't govern it. Yes, there's the Healthcare Act, and as long as they abide by all the rules, they get money for healthcare. The problem with that is it goes into a big pot. So they can take that money, it's not governed that it has to specifically go in towards healthcare. So that's where you find the provincial governments, they can do healthcare cuts, and the federal government can't stop them from doing those cuts, and they can take the money that the federal government gave them and spend it on roads or a bridge or whatever they see fit. So throughout the years, it's been diminishing, our healthcare has been diminishing. The People's Party of Canada wants to give the money back to the provinces and territories, the GST portion, so the federal tax for all the provinces and territories, which equates to $40 billion a year. So that's money that they're already collecting on the federal government's behalf. We're going to give it back to them under new legislation that they get that money, they get that portion of the $40 billion if they abide by the mandates that we see fit as the federal government in the holes in our healthcare system. So it'd have to be spent directly on healthcare services, mental health services, addiction services. It could also include retirement living, community living, homes for disabilities, and things like that, where it's directly increasing our healthcare structure, because right now it just keeps diminishing and our population is growing. I got 26 seconds. Okay, so to switch on to the increase for income security, under our new tax reform, it will give more money in your pocket. We won't take it from you in the first place and then give you a credit. We'll just allow you to keep, which on average is about $2,000 per household, so $2,000 a year you get. We're also going to scrap the carbon tax. So that increased carbon tax increased the price of living across the board. So we're going to scrap that too immediately.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Bulpinder Kaur. So as the representative of Sault Ste. Marie, will you commit to pursuing a policy of strict regulations on non-market steel and steel-rated products, and encouraging the use of domestic steel and steel products in the use of projects and infrastructures?
And Terry, you are first.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. And since being elected, I have made it my priority to continue to work on the steel file. When I was first elected, prior to that I ran, there was a handful of people working at Tenaris just keeping the lights on. Algoma Steel was about to enter CCAA bankruptcy protection because of a lack of action by the previous Conservative government on dumped steel. And some of the first meetings that I had was the Canadian Steel Producers Association, who brought in a list that they had said, we presented this again and again to the previous government with no action. So I went and started lobbying, and I ran for co-chair of the All-Party Steel Caucus. I was successful. And I'm proud to say that we implemented those changes that are creating a very strong trade regime in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. And whilst all the while we're strengthening the steel industry, we're also making sure that I was creating opportunities for all in the steel, such as to apply for the Royal Navy shipbuilding program as part of your question. And they were successful. I was proud that they were successful in finally getting that shipbuilding program, which is helpful. All throughout that process, as we were getting investments, as we were training the regulations, the American administration, President Trump, had put 232 tariffs on the world, including Canada. And I organized and led the charge, a Team Canada approach to go to Washington, in Ottawa, and in Sault Ste. Marie to fight those unfair tariffs. And I can tell you, we stood strong and we won. In fact, Chrystia Freeland, I'm on the trade committee, we went down and looked at the Americans in the eye and we said, we will not ratify the NAFTA trade deal until you lift those tariffs. And I'm glad that we were successful.
Thank you. Sunny.
Thank you very much. Now, this is an incredibly important question, especially because Sault Ste. Marie is a steel city, and we do develop the best steel anywhere in Canada right here in Sault Ste. Marie. Now, let's not pretend for a moment that the new NAFTA deal was a good deal for Canada or a good deal for Sault Ste. Marie. We know right now that our steel mill cannot expand their business into the United States because the Trudeau Liberals got a deal at all costs at the 11th hour. And they signed away our ability to sell steel to the US because they can put those tariffs back on if they see a marked increase. What's a marked increase? Well, it's not defined. So that limits our ability to expand in the US. They also took away and dealt away our ability to have retaliatory tariffs on anything except steel. So we lost that. And they also capitulated on our dairy industry, and we lost a lot there. And then to go even further, they undermined their own trade remedy system by allowing a $42 billion pipeline to be built in British Columbia with Chinese steel brought to Canada. Now, we know that over the last few years, there's been about $100 million of projects across Canada, energy projects, that have been canceled. I, for one, want to stand up for the steel industry here in Sault Ste. Marie, and I think every one of these projects across Canada should be built with steel that is built right here in Sault Ste. Marie because we do it better than anyone else. We've been doing it longer, and we are the only integrated steel mill across Canada. Those projects need to be built with Canadian steel, and they need to be built with steel that's from Sault Ste. Marie. As your MP, I will always fight for those things, and I will always make sure that we get a good deal when we're making these deals with other trade partners.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you for your question. We are 100% committed to making sure that all federal infrastructure projects use Canadian materials, and that includes especially steel, because we know that it is an important industry, and it's important to the Sioux that we make sure that steel being used in Canada is made here in Canada. So we want to make sure that Canadian producers have the first chance at bidding on those projects. We also support the steel industry, you know, not just the industry itself, but also the workers. We want to make sure that the workers' pensions are protected, and that when a business goes into CCAA proceedings, that their pensions are front of line before the debtors and before the creditors. Make sure that their pensions are protected. And then also, when I was meeting with the steelworkers a few weeks ago, they pointed out that yes, there were those tariffs on steel directly from the U.S., but they also feel the effects of tariffs on every single product that's made out of steel. And there's been no action on those products and those tariffs. And so we'll also stand up to those tariffs as well and make sure that the steel that's being produced is not being affected by those tariffs as well.
Thank you. Amy.
Thank you. Bobenburger, did I say it right?
Balpinder.
Okay.
You can
Thank you
call
for-
Bell.
Oh, that's pretty pretty. Thank you for your question. So I'm glad Mr. Spina brought up the $40 billion deal of steel. I hope everybody in this room and watching at home knows about it, because China has been charged with dumping steel in Canada. The reason with China and making steel is you can't trust the quality of the steel. When the steel plant in Sault Ste. Marie makes steel, you know it meets the standards and the requirements that steel is conditioned for. And the $40 billion contract that they have that went to the liquid gas holding tanks, it's very important that this material is up to par and standards. It should have been offered to the Canadian steel plants across the coast, even just a portion of it, but it wasn't even offered to Canadians at all, which is kind of harmful and hurts our economy. China right now, we don't exactly have the great relationship with. They stopped our soy exports, and it's with our canola oils, and there's a lot of things in the trades that they blocked us for. And what do? The federal government currently just rewarded them with $40 billion of untrustable steel in a form for natural gas, which could leak and spill in 2 years. So this is a very bizarre behavior right now. So the People's Party of Canada believes in free markets and free trades, and we believe in repairing the relationships we have with the foreign governments. We believe in strengthening Canadian economy. We believe in getting the steel plant up and running. And if there's a contract for federal infrastructure, we believe in enforcing the legislation that states that it has to be brought to Canadians first and Canadian industry first before you export it and offer it to outside countries.
Thank you. Gio.
It seems there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance about where we're sending our resources, because the TMX pipeline is specifically to shuttle oil to China. So this investment thing, anyway, the Green Party would like to make sure that we make products in Canada, that we don't ship raw materials out and then ship the items back into Canada. That goes for agriculture, that goes for fossil fuels, that goes for steel products as well. So on a national scale, in a very broad sense, we definitely want to ensure that value is added in Canada before it goes anywhere, and that we use Canadian resources and items first. So part of that is in our plan to create a national rail, passenger rail system that would connect pretty well all of Canada and northern communities to the rest of the world. And that will require steel, and it will require high quality steel that we can produce right here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I am Sakshi Bagadia, and my question for today is, Sault Ste. Marie is the new home of many people from around the world. What is your and your party's stance on immigration and multiculturalism?
Sunny.
Thank you very much. This is an important question for Sault Ste. Marie. You know, my family's here with me tonight, and in 1967, they came here from Italy. I'm a family of immigrants, and we've made an incredibly successful life here in Sault Ste. Marie. I've grown up here my entire life, and I have no intention of leaving because we were able to work here and make an incredible life. Now, we look around and we see a whole new life starting in Sault Ste. Marie with new people from new areas around the world, and it's nothing short of inspiring. It's incredible for me to see the investments these individuals have made in our community, and I'm happy to say that I've been a part of it. Now, the Conservative Party of Canada knows that immigration done right is good for Canada. We want to attract the best and brightest people from around the world to come here to Canada and live here and create an incredible life. In doing that, we want to make it easier for them to recognize their credentials here in Canada. If they're an expert somewhere else in the world, we want to make it not only easier to recognize those credentials here in Canada, but province to province. We want to reduce those barriers and take them down so that they can travel anywhere else in Canada with those credentials and create a successful life for themselves and help Canadians coast to coast. Now, in doing that, we want to also help new Canadians with skills like English as a second language or French as a second language, because we know that language is one of the greatest barriers to people starting in a new country. We're very, very interested in keeping those investments and restoring fairness, order, and compassion to the immigration system here in Canada. We know that immigration done right is good for Canada, it's good for Canadians, and it's good for the world, and we want to welcome the best and brightest and make it easy for them to come here.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you for your question. Kind of relating to what Sunny had mentioned. So when I grew up, my school, everybody just looked exactly like me. And now looking at my children's school, and there's actually, people from different places and, people from different cultures, and it's amazing. And I love that my children get to grow up with that, and, meet these people with different experiences from them. And so it's really important to me that we make sure that immigration is a priority for the government. We have right now going on here in the Sioux, the Rural Northern Pilot Project, and we want to make that permanent because we recognize that that's a really important way to support northern and rural economies is by making sure that immigrants are coming to those communities. We also want to make sure that credential recognition is done quicker and easier. I shared the story earlier today that I was at the walk-in clinic in the Station Mall a couple of years ago, and there was a man there. He is a doctor from another country, but when he came here, his credentials weren't recognized, and the process was he was in the 6th year of waiting for his credentials to be recognized here in Canada. So, I mean, that's somebody who's perfectly happy and willing to be living here in the Sioux and being a doctor, taking patients, and the process is just taking too long. So we know that immigrants can be very valuable to our economy and to our services like healthcare. So we want to make sure that they're coming and that we're recognizing their credentials and that they're supported here. And part of what we want to do as well is focus on family reunification because we know that it's a very long process to, one family member comes over and then they have to wait 5 years for another to bring their other family member over. So we want to make sure that we're focusing on family reunification as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy.
Thank you, Sasha, for your question. So the People's Party of Canada believes in immigration. I know there's a lot of talk that we don't, but we really do. Canada is diverse, and we have multiculturalism here. We don't believe we need legislation or some agency to tell us that we're multicultural. Look in this room. We're multicultural. Half of us in here probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for immigration. My family is the same as Sunny's. I'm 4th generation. I only live 2 kilometers from where my family originally settled from Europe, so they came here. So immigration is needed in every country. It shouldn't be closed out. But there are barriers and there's complications sometimes, and we can't have open borders. So we believe in increasing the economic immigrants that come to Canada to help our economy and fill up the holes that we have in the skill trades that we're lacking. In saying that immigration it doesn't count the student visas we have here. The People's Party of Canada want to encourage the people that come here from other countries and come to our schools and they're on student visas. They're here for 3 or 4 years. We want them to stay here. They're here for their education. They want to improve themselves. They get used to the economy. It's easier for them to integrate. One of the important things when a newcomer comes to Canada, whether they're in Sault Ste. Marie or some other part in Canada, is integration. It's so important. We're lucky here in the Sioux. We have a small volunteer program of people who invite newcomers, help them with their language, help them buy their groceries, give them rides to their dentist appointments and things like that. So without these community members and these groups that help the newcomers, it'd be harder for them to integrate in society. So if we just had numerous numbers come in, they just go in their little spots, but it to be helpful and have a number of 150,000.
Thank you. Gio.
I'd like to acknowledge that Canada is the mosaic. It's not the melting pot, and I really appreciate the different communities and the strength of communities in Canada. And so part of the Green Party's platform is, yes, to address gaps in healthcare and other professional realms with immigration and streamlining credential recognition from people who already are doctors, are professionals back in their original homes. But you also have to acknowledge that in an era of climate change, there will be people displaced by rising sea levels and access to water and disruption of food systems and war over those things. So we have to One, establish what it means to be an environmental refugee and accept our fair share of environmental refugees as well. It's not just people who are benefiting us through helping with the economy. It's about ensuring that everyone's taken care of, and particularly because the West is so complicit in climate change. And so, yeah, we need to, on top of that, we need to allocate more funds for ESL and FSL, English second language, French second language programming, and work with municipalities and provinces to allow for better integration into Canadian life. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry.
Over the last 4 years, I was able to garner $250 million in investments for this area, including $90 million for Algoma Steel and $60 million for Tenaris. We're growing. And what the businesses have told us, the leadership, is that we need to find skilled labor. We need to find labor. Because when they find a certain skilled labor, whether it's an engineer or a tradesperson, dozens of jobs are created around that job. So they supported, and the mayor and council supported, the Northern Immigration Pilot Project. And I advocated on behalf of the businesses and on behalf of City Council and the mayor in the area. And we were successful. It was successful in the Atlantic. We transposed it. It's one of the chamber recommendations in the prosperity platform about replicating that. And I was pleased we were able to do that. And we did it by having the Minister of Immigration here, and he saw what a kind and caring and compassionate community we have. He saw the services that we have at the Sioux Community Career Center and at the English as a second language facilities and the volunteers, and it was amazing, and it was amazing what has transpired. We are in a position now, an enviable position, where we will continue to grow because of investments in that particular area. It goes hand in glove with our healthcare commitment, getting more doctors to Sault Ste. Marie too, to expedite it, because not only does the person, say the doc from a country coming over, they can bring their family quickly with this pilot project. So we can fill those voids, because we know that if docs can't bring their family with them, they'll probably leave in a couple of years. But there's many more things that we've done around refugees too as well, which is absolutely critical as a community, and I'm proud of us so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question, please.
Mojani, Jesus Wabagan and Dishnakas, Dodamagan, Thunderbayan, Jojabao, Migmog Jagnashi Stindian Indakwe. My name's Carrie Rutledge Oliver, and my question is, climate change is a real problem that is going to affect everyone. Both individual Canadians and Canadian businesses have a role to play in fighting climate change and moving us towards a greener economy. As Northern businesses and institutions will be participating and paying heavily into the system, the Sault Ste. Marie Chambers has been recommending that the North also receive its fair share of revenues to mitigate risks in our community and to our industries. Will you commit to bringing funds raised by our carbon taxes, cap and trade, and other similar programs that might come into effect back into our community to help businesses transition to lower carbon economies and stimulate research and development?
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for your question. So absolutely, we are committed to any of the carbon pricing revenues that come in will go to individuals, again, to make sure that they're not spending more than they're getting back. So they're going to be receiving that money back. And then in terms of supporting businesses, we are fully committed to helping businesses as we transition away from fossil fuels and towards a green economy. So part of our commitment is to invest in the new green technologies and the manufacturers of those, and to support the workers as well. So we want to make sure that there are training and retraining opportunities available for workers, both for their sakes as well as for the businesses, because we want to make sure that the businesses have access to skilled workers. So we want to make sure that the transition away from fossil fuels is as smooth as possible for everybody involved. And we'll be creating 300,000 new jobs with these investments across Canada over the next 10 years. And I'm going to be making sure that a good chunk of those come here to the Soo, because we know that we need those jobs here. We've got a youth outflow going like crazy right now. So we want to make sure that those jobs are coming here, and that businesses here are supported as we transition. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy.
Yes, the People's Party of Canada, we believe in abolishing the carbon tax, but if that doesn't happen, then if we still had the carbon tax, of course, I don't think there's anybody up on this panel that would say we wouldn't fight for Sault Ste. Marie and getting the money back here in the north out of the carbon tax. It's for innovative, and maybe they can help with development and new technology for their industry and what they need. We would definitely fight for that if the carbon tax was still there. The carbon tax creates this money that sits in a pool, and a lot of people get it back, but sometimes you feel like you're that seagull on the beach where that one guy throws a French fry and then all the seagulls are trying to grab that French fry. That's sometimes what it feels like when the government gives back the money that they take from you. So when it comes to carbon tax, it's not exactly an environmental plan or a strategy. It's just a tax. And it's unfortunate that they take it from these companies in the first place, and then we have to fight to get it back. But if it is still in place, we would definitely fight for Suites. It's important for our industries to want to stay here, and it's important that we show them that we can get them those credits back and give them to them so that they stay and build the economy and for our jobs. It's so important when the steel plant or the tube mill, when they're off on layoffs, you can see it affects the community as a whole. It just trickles down. I have a little sandwich shop, and I can tell when people are laid off because they won't come in because they don't know when their next pay is going to come, and they can barely make their mortgage payment. So it's important that we fight for the Suites and for the companies to get their carbon money back.
Thank you. Gio.
So, thank you for the question. It's been proven by economists, and they've received a Nobel Prize for it, that the carbon tax is one of the best ways for addressing climate change. It's just known at this point. And as it stands in Canada, it's a fee and dividend system, so it goes back to Canadians, and it's not part of investment into greener technologies, but it does does give incentive to larger companies who are emitting carbon to look into alternatives for changing how they do their processes to reduce carbon emissions. But in addition, we already have money that exists for companies, for investment, for development, and $3.3 billion a year goes to fossil fuel companies, which are largely international, and a number of them have said that they don't even want the subsidies. So, and Canada bought a pipeline, $4.5 billion. Imagine putting that instead towards green technologies, towards a electrical grid. We have the money already. Apparently, we've been able to leverage all of this money, billions of dollars of money, for fossil fuels, and yet we only put tens of millions into renewable energies. And I think by instead putting that money towards local and renewable and sustainable companies instead will not only improve the economy, but actually address climate change.
Thank you. Terry.
Thank you for that question. And Liberals have always said that we believe that the economy and the environment go hand in hand. The opposition, they believe that you can only do one or the other. We know we can do both, and we must do both if we want to move forward, not backwards. That's why we, in this platform, are cutting taxes for businesses, small and large, that are in the green economy, producing green jobs, green products, and we're cutting their taxes by 50%. With Sault Ste. Marie being the alternative energy capital, self-proclaimed, of North America, we've seen growth in that area. I think about Helene that makes solar panels. They've been part of the Sioux landscape for quite a while. We've invested a couple of times in Helene for $3 million, and that's really important. The TMX project, through environmental consultation, through environmental process and through consultation with the First Nations, we were able to get it approved twice. And we are further committed to work with First Nations to find a way to do some equity share. And the $500 million yearly that will make in tax revenue, we have committed to the green economy to transition us for the future. Sault Ste. Marie is well positioned, in a great position, to become truly, again, and underlined and highlighted, the North American alternative energy capital. And it's going to create jobs and it's going to be successful. So yes, we have a plan in place to do that on large scales and small scales. We have put a price on pollution, and the Auditor General has verified that the revenue that we are taking in will go back in people's pockets, but it'll also go into the MUSH sector, municipalities, universities, colleges.
Thank you. Sunny.
Thank you much. Thank you very much. That is an extremely important question as well. Thank you for asking that. So, to be clear, our first act, if we are elected next week, will be an act to repeal the carbon tax. We recognize that a carbon tax hurts individuals in Northern Ontario and Sault Ste. Marie more than it hurts other communities, and it does not change behaviors here. And I know this because on June 12th this year, I had my heat on because it was that cold on June 12th. And we all know when we go home tonight, we're going to have our heat on. And no amount of money you charge me to heat my home is going to change that. It's just going to make it more expensive to do it. In fact, Justin Trudeau's own environment minister refused to rule out further increases to the carbon tax, which would mean an average family would pay $469 a year more to heat their home and 31 cents a liter more at the pumps. Now, I've heard my friend talk about investments in things like solar panels. Well, I've had conversations with those companies, and unfortunately, they're facing a 30 and 25% tariff on any solar panel they make to go into the United States. And they do have a manufacturing plant that's in the United States, and they'd like to have those jobs here in Canada. And you know what? So would I. I want those industries here in Sault Ste. Marie, and I want to make it so attractive for those businesses that they never leave, that they stay here forever, and that they employ people here in our community for the long term. Because I want to invest in folks here in the Soo, and I want to invest in businesses here in the Soo. And a carbon tax will do nothing but drive those businesses away by driving their costs up. You don't have to look much farther than the grocery store to know how much farther those costs are going up, because items have to be shipped here to Sault Ste. Marie from other places. So to be clear, our first act will be to repeal the carbon tax so that we can help businesses and people get ahead.
Thank you. Miigwech. The next question will be our last for the evening.
Hi everyone, my name is, my name is Elizabeth Niche, and my question is, what will you and your party do to ensure and enhance public safety and border security?
And Amy, it is you first.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth, for your question. So we believe in enforcing our borders. And in saying that, I know Maxime Bernier has said that we want to put a fence up, but not like the Trump government wants to put a wall up. We're just saying where the points of entry are, where people have been crossing from New York into Quebec and trying to claim refugee status. We want to put a fence up there. The reason for that is we don't want to push these people away. We just want to be able to tell them, please go through our legal point of entry and apply for refugee status that way. Because what's happening when they come across the border and they're coming across and they just want to be in Canada, it's costing taxpayers about $14,000 and some odd dollars a person once they come in and we try to register them and get them situated. If they went through the legal points of entry, it would prevent all that from happening. And what's happening is they're living in tents, which is no way for these people to live, but they have nowhere to go. So the federal government has put up tents for them, and they used our military to do that. They put the military to work and said, please build some tents. But I believe what the federal government should have been doing at the time was put the military to work to say, please watch this spot, because people are sneaking into the country. And what happens is they're stepping ahead of the refugees that are already in line to come into Canada, people who are actually in camps, that their lives are in danger, and they're hurting, and they're scared, and they have no food, and they're living in horrible conditions. These are the refugees that we need to bring into Canada, the people that are waiting, the people that just skip the line and cut into our country illegally. It's not fair. It's not fair to the other people who need our immediate.
Thank you. Gio.
So the crux of what I think Amy was getting at is safe third country law, which is an agreement with USA and Canada that wherever a refugee lands is where they can apply for refuge. And since the Trump administration has been in place, they imposed a ban on people from certain countries from claiming refugee status there, people from SHIT whole countries. And if they're in the USA already, that means that they can't apply for refugee status in Canada because they've landed there, and that's why they're going through the routes that they're going. They're circumventing the usual routes because our laws don't accommodate for that. For people who are from those countries are not allowed in the USA and then come here. So we want to eliminate the safe third country law so that they don't have to go freeze their feet off to apply for refugee status. We want them, yes, to go to the ports of entry, but we want to do that by welcoming them instead of putting up a fence and blocking them out. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. And spelling and profanity is still a profanity, Gio. So let's not do that going forward. Terry.
Well, thank you very much. This summer I had the honor of hosting the Northern Ontario Liberal Caucus here in Sault Ste. Marie. And at the same time, we did announce the $16 million for Tenaris. Bill Blair, who is the Minister for Border Security, Gang Violence, the former police chief in Toronto, was up, and we inspected the border here. And we went through it, and I can tell you that we have some very excellently trained officers there that are keeping guns and drugs, from coming into this border. We've invested millions of dollars for enhanced training, for enhanced equipment as well, in particular with some of the new drugs that are coming in, the opioids that are extremely dangerous for men and women that are on the front line in all services. And we're going to continue to do that. So we've made those investments, and we have excellent skills here in Sault Ste. Marie in doing that. And I think that's absolutely critical to highlight and underline. And I was very supportive of the border crossing opening. I was able to cut the ribbon there, which allows for bigger bays, bigger places for them to do the inspections that are necessary to keep this area safe. And I can tell you that we are committed to continually strengthening our borders, and in particular, not only just in Sault Ste. Marie, but when I think about our Arctic in the north and about us exercising our sovereignty up there is absolutely critical. And, I've always said that Santa Claus is Canadian, so we always make sure, and a little levity, but we are taking steps to make sure that we continue to have our sovereignty in the north section.
Thank you. Sunny.
Thank you very much for this question. And I think it's clear to everyone in this room that I've actually dedicated my life to this exact issue. I've dedicated my life to the safety and security of people in Sault Ste. Marie who live here and who visit here. And I could support nothing less than a government that shares those values and wants to ensure that every person who comes here or stays here is safe and secure. And that is what I want to continue to support. A Conservative government this next week will invest in frontline resources for people who are on the front line dealing with crimes and dealing with crimes of violence. Not only that, we will also ensure that the legislation is there and that the legislation actually targets criminals. We want to ensure that we are targeting criminals and holding them fully accountable for their behaviors. We want to target, in particular, gang violence and gang crimes. We want to impose mandatory minimum sentences for individuals who knowingly use a firearm in an offense against an innocent person. And we want to ensure that we find a way for our judicial system to work with victims and work with everyone who works within it to ensure a safe and fair process for everyone. We also want to introduce training for judges, mandatory training in sexual assault awareness, so that judges know when victims come to court what they may be going through. It's important for us to have meaningful investments that will be tangible and show real results on the ground so that everyone who lives here and comes here enjoys their right to enjoy this area freely. Now, we live on a border here in Sault Ste. Marie, and it's a border that is better than anywhere else. We have an incredible relationship with our partners in the U.S. There's no reason we shouldn't be partnering with them to ensure that every transaction that comes across that border is safe for both countries. And I know that I have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to make sure that we do that for Canadians and for Sault Ste. Marie.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thanks for your question. There's kind of quite a few parts to it, so I'm going to do my best to sort of pick a little bit at each. So in terms of border security, the way that Gio and Amy were looking at it, Gio's absolutely right that the Safe Third Country Agreement is the primary issue there, and so we want to make sure that we suspend that, and then that way those people will be coming across, they'll apply legally for refugee status, and they won't be trying to come across illegally. And then in terms of border security otherwise, we're going to invest in making sure that the border agents have the resources that they need to make sure that guns aren't coming across the border, because we know that the majority of illegal guns in Canada are coming across the border from the US, and we want to make sure that that's stopping. Looking more at the kind of the public safety side of your question, there are a lot of ways that we want to go about this. So we want to make sure that we're addressing violence against women, and that we are acting appropriately so that women know the resources available to them, and that they feel comfortable leaving abusive relationships if that may be the case. And then we also want to make sure that we're investing in programs to prevent kids from joining gangs in the first place. You know, we know here in the Soo, I don't think that's a particularly large issue, but in other large centers, gang violence is a very important, or not important, a very it's a major issue. And we want to make sure that we're preventing youth from joining those gangs. And we've had promises from past governments that that would happen, and that no action's been taken. And we want to make sure that we are actually investing in those programs to prevent them from joining. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear closing statements from the candidates, and a reminder that you each have 2 minutes for closing remarks. So we will start with Gio.
So the central question, I guess there's two central questions in the Green Party platform, is can we afford to continue doing what we've been doing for the past 150 years? So that looks like, can we afford a first past the post electoral system? Can we afford to continue emitting CO2 and greenhouse gases? Can we afford to allow for corporate and company lobbyists to affect our legislation? Can we afford continued colonial practices in Canada? My answer is no. The Green Party's answer is no. We can't continue like this. The United Nations has acknowledged that climate change needs to be addressed and that carbon emissions need to be eliminated by 2050. And the action on that is limited, and we need to do something about that. The second question is, looking forward, what do we want this country to look like? I want for electrical cars to be available. I want public transit to be way more accessible. Reminds me of the quote, a rich country is not one in which poor people can afford a car. It's one in which rich people take public transit. And that's a key idea for Green Party, is that we can have a future that looks amazing, that is sustainable, that accommodates everyone's needs, and we can do that by investing in youth, investing in infrastructure, and divesting from fossil fuel.
Thank you. Terry.
Well, thank you very much to everyone for hosting this very important discussion, to allow the people in the audience and the people at home to hear our platforms. I'm proud of my record. Over the last 4 years, I've worked extremely hard to make sure that we got our fair share of investments here in the Soo. I believe my experience as a city councillor and a trustee has helped me hit the ground running and garner that kind of support. When our steel industry was in trouble, I was there and continued to work very, very hard. The Conservatives, when they saw the 232 tariffs, their action was to raise the white flag, to surrender. We didn't. We hit them dollar for dollar with our counter tariffs, and we invested $2 billion in the steel industry. And I was able to get investments here so we could continue to grow again. It's 40% of our economy, but we've invested in affordable housing as well, in transit, in a number of items. My fear is that we're going to see another movie again. Doug Ford has cut significantly in Ontario, and he ran without a platform. The Conservatives, they've been running without a platform until Friday night, late in the evening, on the Thanksgiving long weekend when people have already voted, announced their platform. $53 billion in cuts we can see in that platform. 14 billion of them are hidden. So what are they going to cut? What federal service are they going to cut? What we don't need to see is to have Doug Ford have a dance partner in Andrew Scheer. We're about investing in people. We're about investing in communities. And we've seen over 1 million jobs created over the last 4 years. I have the energy and the experience to continue to deliver results for this community, and I humbly ask for your support and vote on October 21st. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you. Sunny.
Thank you. And I want to extend the most sincere thank you to everyone who took the time to come here tonight to listen to all of our platforms, and also to everyone who's watching at home. And the first thing I want to say is, you know, I recognize that my friend and fellow candidate has talked to you a lot, and just now talked to you about Conservative cuts. Well, I want to tell you that that's completely false. It goes against everything that we have said in this campaign. It goes against everything we have put in writing, and it goes against every promise I have made to you during this campaign. What I have promised to you is that we will cut your cost of living. We will put more money back in your pockets. We will continue to invest in infrastructure, and we will continue to invest in healthcare and social services across this country. Now, again, I know I've dedicated my life in service to this community. I have put my community before myself time and time again, and I have done that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I intend to continue to do that moving forward. I intend to continue doing that not only with you, but with our surrounding First Nations partners and our international partners around the world, so that we can achieve the best future possible for Sault Ste. Marie, every resident here, and every resident that is to come here. This is my home. I was born here, I was raised here, and I fully intend to continue living my entire life here. With your support on October 21st, we will get down to work, we'll put more money back in your pockets, and together, we will grow the Soo. I ask for your support on October 21st. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you. I'm sure that I'm not the only one here who has seen in the polls that it's looking more and more like we're going to be having a minority government. It's looking like it will be a minority government with the NDP holding the balance of power. And, I'm actually very excited about that because I know some of the best developments in Canada have come about when the NDP has held the balance of power. Things like healthcare, the CPP, the National Student Loans Program, those all came about when the NDP held the balance of power. And here in the Soo, I don't think that we need a yes man to the Prime Minister, somebody who's just going to do what the Prime Minister tells him to do. What we need is somebody who will actually be able to act on behalf of the people of Sault Ste. Marie and do what's best for the people of Sault Ste. Marie and be able to push through those programs that will help the people of Sault Ste. Marie, things like universal pharmacare and affordable housing and affordable childcare and ending the interest on student loans. And I think that's what's best for Sault Ste. Marie. And I think that's what people need to keep in mind when they go to the polls. I hope you'll keep in mind when you go to the polls that a minority government with the NDP holding the balance of power is the best case situation for Canada. And I look forward to speaking with any of you after this. And thank you very much for coming out or watching tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy.
Yes, thank you everybody for attending and watching at home. It's very important. There's we have, the People's Party of Canada has 16 platform policies, and I didn't get to touch on them. We have one about freedom of expression and the right to free speech, and we have one on immigration, refugees. We have a foreign policy. We want to abolish supply management. There's quite a few really good points in there, so please go and look at them. We are a new party, so a lot of people aren't aware of us, so I just wanted to get the word out. Gio and I are kind of in the same boat where we're not parties that are whipped or established in the fact where we're not governed by our party leaders to tell us what to do or what we can and cannot do. So the People's Party of Canada, if we had an issue in Sault Ste. Marie that I needed dealt with and brought to the top, I would have the support of my party, and Gio, it's the same. But the Conservative Party, the Liberal, and the NDP all have to work within a certain ground that they're dictated to. So when you hire us and you're looking for us to work for you, we could actually work for you, the People's Party of Canada or Geo, and you could come to us and we could make that solution for you and bring it to the top and have the support of the rest of our party and the members. It's hard when you get 338 different people in different parties in a room to get everybody to agree. So that's what makes it difficult. And when you already have somebody's foot in the door blocking you from allowing something to get passed, this is what happens in government. This is what's been happening for the last 150 years. So that's why it's always flopped from one side to the other. But I just hope everybody gets out there and votes. And in the last couple seconds, I'll say just make an informative vote and see what values tend to you and what's important to you and go based off that. If we could have everybody in this room representing Sault Ste. Marie, we'd be doing a good job. We're all great, excellent people and good standing people in society. So I'd like to thank everybody tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And we made it through 2 very packed hours of information. So congratulations to everyone in this room and watching at home. I just have a few thank yous to wrap up the evening. On behalf of the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce, Algoma University, SooToday.com, and Shaw Spotlight, I would like to thank our candidates for taking part in tonight's panel. We wish each of you the best in the remaining campaign period. Regardless of the outcome, we thank each of you for committing to take up representation for our community in Ottawa. We know this was a decision that each of you weighed carefully before assuming candidacy. I would like to once again thank our partners for this evening, Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce, Shaw Spotlight, and its staff and volunteers who are here to televise tonight's forum, SooToday and Village Media for their assistance in streaming tonight's event online, Algoma University and its political science and law and justice programs for their input in tonight's evening event and their assistance with the development of the questions. And we would also like to acknowledge the staff of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, and in particular the City Clerk's Office and the IT Department, who were instrumental in securing use of the Council Chamber for the evening. Lastly, we would like to thank everyone here in Council Chambers or viewing at home for joining us. We hope that this discussion has helped better inform you about each of the candidates and their respective platforms. Canada faces some significant challenges right now and in the years ahead, but we also have no shortage of opportunities. With that in mind, our leadership in Ottawa is going to have some significant responsibilities and are going to make decisions that are going to impact every Canadian for years to come. We encourage you to exercise your right to have your voice heard and make sure you take part in the election process on October 21st. Thank you again, and good night.